Welcome. In this lecture, I want to talk about, we've talked about the Euclidean plane, so I want to talk about how we actually view the soccer field, football field, as kind of sitting inside the Euclidean plane. The biggest thing to watch out for really being that everybody kind of sits it inside in a different way. So the soccer field, right? So a typical soccer field is, so it's going to be 125 meters. There's a little bit of variance in this, like it can be a little bit smaller by 85 meters. Okay, so this is 136 by 93 yards. So what can that tell me, like, in terms of how I'm going to look at the field? So if I had my coordinates here, and I'm not going to label anything on here yet, so I can have one axis like this and one axis like this, right? And then your pitch can sit right inside of here. You can imagine it almost as sitting right inside of the plane like this, right? So if it's going to sit like this, then my 125 meters are going to be telling me, so this is going to go from 0 to 125, okay? So this tells me that this is actually in meters, and it's meters in one of the directions, like in the long direction. And you might mark some other things on here. This is probably, so this is like 100, should be roughly there, 50, 25, 75, okay, so it's not equally spaced, they should be, those are each 25 apart. And then you also have the other direction. So that came from the 125, and then from here, so this would be again in meters, and now we're going to 85. Okay, so maybe instead of having them be the same as those, so maybe we want to do this in 5s now because there's more of them. And then you would have like 40 to probably you'd want to put the 5s here. Maybe we'll put those on this side so that it doesn't overcrowd it. But you can kind of get the point that this is giving me a way to kind of record where all the players are, and this is something that people often want to do. So I could potentially have a player whose location is here, right? So if the player's location is there, then to figure out its first coordinate, I kind of want to go duck, 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 duck. So maybe this is about 77. Okay, so how did I figure that out? I dropped down and then I looked at where I was here. So my first coordinate would be 77 based on having dropped down to the axis like that. And then for my other coordinate, I could want to go, so now I want to go in this direction. Duck, 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 duck. This one's about 55. Okay. Right. So I found a way to encode using this kind of coordinate notation the locations of all the players on the field. This is done for a lot of different kinds of modeling. But there's a few things to watch out for, so careful, right? So what are some things to be careful about? So one is, maybe I've drawn the field like, it looks, again, I have one axis and the other. And maybe I'm still in meters. But now my field is going to sit here, so it's going to be more like this. Right? So now these ones are actually going to range to 85, right? With, now you have to do all the points there. And here, these ones are going to range to 125. Right, and then I have all these here. And now this point, it's going to look really funny when I'm going to take the point 77 55 is now actually 5577. So I'm looking at something that's, whoops, so my first course, so it's 5577. Right, so it's actually going to look like something like, so this would down here would be 55, and then here would be 77. Okay, so the point now, that same point, that same player position is actually here, and this is going to be 55 and 77. Okay, so same player location. I'll even emphasize that by writing it down. So it's the same player location. Okay, but it's represented differently. Okay, so represented differently. Okay, and then you might be able to imagine, so this is kind of the first thing to be careful about. So this is like, careful, maybe I'll even put exclamation points there. I've even gotten caught in this trap before, forgetting to check, like, where did they stick the origin, how did they orient it? Okay, so the other way to do this is, it's quite possible that I have the same kind of orientation there as over there. So maybe I still am actually sitting this in here so that it looks like this. But maybe instead I'm in yards. So maybe now I'm in yards this way or yards this way. Okay, so I've got, so if this was the case, then instead of going to 125, then I'm actually going to 136, right? And then again, I kind of want to put the numbers there to help me out orienting myself. And here would be, this is no longer 85, it's 93. And then you could actually compute the same point here. So our same point will have different coordinates again, and you're going to actually have to translate them by the translation between yards and meters. So again, the same point now has coordinates in, so same point or player location right, now has coordinates in yards. Right, so they'll be a bit bigger. Okay, so so what's kind of the key point? The soccer field is often, you want to view the locations of players as points in the Euclidean plane. But you kind of need to like check how you kind of oriented it here. If we kind of oriented the field like this, then this player, we would drop down to here to figure out its first coordinate, and then we over to here to figure out its second coordinate. Okay, and then we noticed that if instead the field was oriented like this, then my coordinates are actually swapped. I'm still dropping down to figure out my first coordinate and over to figure out my second. So this is it's important to keep these things straight. It's also possible that it's reflected over. That was the other one I didn't show you. It starts getting trickier, but this is just like for the basics. And then the other thing is that you can end up with your units, instead of being in meters, they could be in yards. So you need to actually kind of keep track of that. And there is a translation between meters and yards. You can even just get your cell phone or something to do it for you. Okay, so I hope that made some sense, and I will see you in the next lecture.